This is a continuation of my review of Manly Palmer Hall's analysis of the Tarot deck from his book, The Secret Teachings of All Ages, Chapter 29. And in the first video on this topic, I went over a brief introduction to Hall's interpretation, and I went over the first 5 cards of the Tarot deck. And since I didn't include a visual image of those, I thought I'd quickly go back over those 5 again before I continue on to do the next set of cards in succession. So in the Rider-Waite deck, the first card is the 0 card, and it is Lamont the Fool. The Fool has been likened to the material universe because the immortal sphere is the world of unreality. The first numbered major trump card is the Juggler, as Hall calls him, or the Magician. This card represents that the entire fabric of creation is nothing but a dream, and the existence of man is nothing but a juggling of divine elements. The second numbered major trump card of the Tarot is the Female Pope, or High Priestess, and this is how she is pictured in the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. The third numbered major trump card of the Tarot is the Empress. The fourth numbered major trump card of the Tarot is the Emperor. The Emperor is the demiurgus, the great king of the inferior world. And the fifth numbered major trump card of the Tarot is the Pope, or the Hierophant. The Pope or Hierophant card signifies the initiate or master of the mystery of life. And that brings us to where I left off last time, which is card number 6, which is called the Lovers. Hall says there are 2 distinct forms of this card. The original depiction is from the Jean Noblet Tarot deck, which was one of the earliest of the Marseille tradition, and it was printed in Paris around 1650. That card shows a youth with a female figure on either side of him, and one of the figures wears a golden crown and is winged, and the other wears the flowing robes of the Bacchanet with a wreath of vine leaves on her head. According to Hall, on that card, the maidens represent the twofold soul of man, spiritual and animal. One is his guardian angel, and the second his ever-present demon. The young man stands at the beginning of his mature life and must choose between the 2 paths. Though the original card seems to show Cupid aiming an arrow at the young man, Hall says in reality this represents his star, the genius of fate. He also says in the Egyptian tarot, the arrow of the genius is pointed directly at the figure of vice, showing that the end of her path is destruction. Hall's interpretation of this is that the card reminds man that the price of free will choice is responsibility. In the Rider-Waite deck, which is shown here, the imagery for this card is changed significantly from the traditional depiction. This is the card we are most familiar with, and it depicts a priest uniting a youth and a maiden in holy wedlock. Hall comments that perhaps they represent Adam and Eve. The 7th numbered major trump card of the Tarot is called the Chariot. This card depicts a victorious warrior riding in a chariot that is drawn by either black and white horses or sphinxes. The warrior wears a crown, and the canopy of his chariots, held up by 4 columns, represent the 4 mighty ones who uphold the world, represented by the drapery of the canopy, which is covered with stars. Hall says this card signified the exalted one who rides the chariot of creation. The fact that this card bears the number 7 illustrates the arcane truth that the 7 planets are the chariots of the solar power, which rides victorious in their midst. The warrior who drives the chariot carries the scepter of the solar energy, and his shoulders are ornamented with lunar crescents. According to Hall, the sphinxes drawing the chariot represent the secret and unknown power by which the victorious ruler is moved continuously through the various parts of his universe. The 8th numbered major trump card of the Tarot is called Justice. This card portrays a figure seated upon a throne. On the back of the throne are 2 columns. The figure of Justice wears a crown and carries a sword in her right hand and a pair of scales in her left. Hall comments that this card reminds us of the judgment of the soul that takes place in the Hall of Osiris, which teaches that only balanced forces can endure. The sword of justice destroys that which is unbalanced. In the Rider-Waite deck, the 8th and 11th major trumps are reversed. One explanation for this is that A.E. Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith and the Rider Company that published the deck in 1909 were both members of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they switched the position of these two cards in order to make them better fit the astrological correspondences worked out by the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Under that system, the 8th card is associated with Leo and the 11th with Libra. The 9th major trump card of the Tarot is the Hermit. On this card is pictured an old man who wears the garment of a monk and is leaning upon a staff. He carries a lamp in his right hand, but it is partly concealed by his cape. Hall says the card was supposed to represent Diogenes in his quest for an honest man. The hermit is the personification of the secret organizations which for many centuries have carefully concealed the light of the ancient wisdom from the profane and uninitiated. His staff represents knowledge. According to Hall, in the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the hermit shields the lamp behind a rectangular cape. This illustrates that wisdom, if exposed to the fury of ignorance, would be destroyed, just the way the tiny flame given off a lamp might be should a storm arise. The figure is pictured as a hermit because through renunciation, the hermetic life, man attains depth of character and tranquility of spirit. The 10th major trump card of the Tarot is called the Wheel of Fortune. This card shows a wheel with 8 spokes, which is also the Buddhist symbol of the Wheel of Life. Clinging to the wheel, we see Anubis and Typhon, who stand for the principles of good and evil. We also see a Sphinx, who carries the sword of justice. Hall says this signifies the perfect equilibrium of universal wisdom. Anubis is shown rising and Typhus descending. But when Typhus reaches the bottom, evil ascends again, and when Anubis reaches the top, good reigns supreme once more. According to Hall, the Wheel of Fortune represents the lower universe as a whole, with divine wisdom, pictured as the Sphinx, as the eternal mediator between good and evil. The 11th major trump card of the Tarot is called Strength. Above the girl's head is a hat that looks like the infinity symbol. She has her hands on the mouth of a ferocious-looking lion. Hall comments that there's controversy over whether the girl is opening or closing the lion's mouth. Though most writers say she is closing the jaws of the lion, Hall says upon critical inspection, it appears the opposite is true. He interprets this as meaning the young woman symbolizes spiritual strength, and the lion represents the animal world the girl is mastering. She's able to do this as a result of her mastery over the secret wisdom. Hall also says the lion signifies the summer solstice and the girl Virgo, for when the sun enters the constellation of Virgo, the lion is robbed of his strength. Hall also says he believes the girl is opening the lion's mouth in order to find the key of wisdom that it, the king of beasts, holds between its teeth. She demonstrates courage and strength because these are prerequisites to the acquisition of knowledge. Hall says in the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the symbolism is the same, but the girl is instead represented as a priestess. The 12th major trump card of the Tarot is the Hanged Man. On this card, we see a young man hanging by his left leg from a horizontal beam. The beam is supported by 2 tree trunks. The right leg of the man is crossed in the back of the left, and his arms are behind his back. This forms a cross, surmounting a downward pointing triangle. Hall says this means the figure forms an inverted symbol of sulfur. Occultist Eliphas Levi writes that this signifies the man has accomplished the great work. Levi compares the hanged man to Prometheus, the eternal sufferer, and says the man's upturned feet signify the spiritualization of his lower nature. Hall's interpretation of this card is that it depicts polarity, temporarily triumphant over the spiritual principle of equilibrium. In order to accomplish this, man must reverse or invert the order of his life. Because he renounces the rule of gold in favor of the golden rule, he attains the role of philosopher. Hall comments that in the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the hanged man signifies the sun god who dies every year for his world over and over again. The 13th major trump card of the tarot is called the Death card. Hall first discusses the original portrayal of this card, which shows a skeleton figure that is using a great scythe to cut off the heads, hands, and feet that are rising out of the earth around it. Hall says the skeleton is the symbol of the first and supreme deity because it is the foundation of the human body, and the absolute supreme deity is the foundation of all creation. The fact that the skeleton is reaping signifies physical death, but on a philosophical level, Hall says it represents the irresistible impulse in nature which causes every being to be ultimately absorbed into the divine, from which it originated in the first place. The blade of the skeleton scythe is shaped like the moon, which has a crystallizing power. The field in which the skeleton reaps represents the universe. According to Hall, the card depicts the truth that all things growing out of the earth will eventually be cut down and will return to the earth once again. More modern versions of the card, including the figure from the Rider-Waite deck, portray death as a figure in armor mounted on a white horse, which tramples both young and old underfoot. The pseudo-Egyptian card shows a rainbow behind the death figure, which signifies the morality of the body and eventually achieves the immortality of the spirit. Death can never completely destroy life because life always renews itself. Hall says the card signifies that the universe is constantly undergoing disintegration and then reintegration over and over again in a cycle. The 14th card of the tarot is called Temperance. This card shows an angelic figure with wings that has the symbol for the sun on her forehead. The rays of the sun shine out around her head. She is depicted carrying two urns, one of which is empty and one which is full. She is shown continually pouring the contents of the upper urn into the lower one, and this process takes place over and over again. As the lower vessel fills, the vases are reversed. Hall's commentary on this is that the flowing water represents the living water. The pouring signifies how life pours first from the invisible into the visible, then from the visible back into the invisible. The demiurgus of this world, that Hall calls Jehovah, is the force that controls the pouring. The angelic figure wears the sun upon her forehead because it is the sun which controls the flow of water, because it draws the water upward with its solar rays. The water then falls as rain upon the earth, and the cycle continues over and over again. According to Hall, this is symbolic of the passage of human life back and forth between the negative and positive poles of the creative system. In the pseudo-Egyptian deck, the winged figure is male as opposed to female. Otherwise, the symbolism is the same. The last card which I'll cover in this segment of the video is the 15th card of the tarot, which is called the Devil. On this card, we find a creature resembling Pan, with the arms and body of a man, the legs and feet of a goat or dragon, and the horns of a ram or deer. It stands upon a cubic stone. In front of the stone stand two figures who are chained by a ring to the front of the stone. They represent the animal natures of man in the form of a male and female elemental. The creature that sits on the stone carries a lighted torch. Hall says the entire figure is symbolic of the magic powers of the astral light or universal mirror, in which the divine forces are reflected in an inverted or infernal state. The creature, which looks like a demon, is a being that exists in the shadows, and the torch it carries represents the false light which guides unillumined souls to their undoing. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, Hall says the creature appears as Typhon, who is created by man's own misdeeds, which end up destroying him. In the final version of this video, I will continue to cover trump cards 17 through 22 and give Hall's brief explanation of the minor arcana of the tarot.